Today, I want to highlight a side project that GOA's helped work on with some US senators. Remember Xavier Becerra, the anti-gun attorney general from California that Biden tapped to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS? Yeah, he's the guy at the top of the food chain who is ultimately responsible for censoring the self-defense stats from the CDC's website and giving out all kinds of anti-gun research grants. He's a huge threat to the Second Amendment with all the power of the HHS behind him. And that got Senator Mike Braun of Indiana and Ted Budd of North Carolina thinking, we should probably put limits on his ability to enforce gun control. They found a must-pass bill, the Pandemic and Hazards Preparedness Reauthorization Act, something that was used by the federal government throughout the last few years and offered this amendment.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, Americans saw government flourish while many of our constitutional rights were diminished. More and more, big government wants to turn everything into a national emergency. Recently, the Secretary of Health and Human Services stated that gun violence is a public health emergency. This would give HHS the ability to restrict Americans' right to keep and bear arms. HHS was never intended to implement gun control of any kind. My amendment with Senator Budd would simply prohibit HHS from declaring a public health emergency to implement gun control. And I am requesting a vote on this one.
Okay. Thank you. In my view, it is critical that we protect the authority of the Secretary of HHS to declare public health emergencies based on science and evidence. And this would be, I think, an unfortunate precedent, and I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Basically, it would have blocked Health Secretary Becerra from declaring a public health emergency for the purposes of imposing gun control. Now you might ask, is this really a threat? Well, if the Secretary were to declare gun violence as a national emergency, here's just a few things that the emergency powers might unlock. Making new grants and government contracts with anti-gun organizations. Open up investigations into the cause, treatment, or prevention of the disease or disorder, which in this case, that disease would be your lawfully owned guns. Provide supplies, equipment, services, and detail employees from HHS to the anti-gun organizations in order to aid in carrying out whatever gun control program might be funded. Facilitating coordination among governments, which in this case could mean helping local anti-gun governments team up against your pro-gun state legislature. Support initial emergency operations, whatever that might be, and help with the preparedness and deployment of National Disaster Medical System, or NDMS teams, as well as enabling the Secretary of Defense to deploy military trauma care providers and trauma centers. I'm sure there's no way to weaponize this deployment of the military's troops against gun owners.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're gonna have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
Let me shoot an American.
Yeah.
Did you just edit in a clip of National Guard troops prepared to shoot Americans during Hurricane Katrina?
They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, it's not even loaded. And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun, relax.
Well, they punched me in the face.
Relax now.
Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me.
GOA fought hard for the federal government to put protections against the National Disasters Emergency Act being weaponized against gun owners. Now it is some of the best federal protections against misuse. But none of this applies to HHS, and we know that gun violence is a public health epidemic is one of the new talking points of the anti-gun movement since COVID.
Before I let you go, I want to ask about another epidemic in the U.S., and that is gun violence.
Myself, as a public health person, I think you can't run away from that. I mean, when you see people getting killed, I mean, in this last month, it's just been horrifying what's happened. How can you say that's not a public health issue?
And that's why the tools of public health need to be used to prevent gun violence.
After decades of silence, the CDC is speaking up about America's gun violence epidemic.
And joining them now, the American Medical Association, tweeting this: gun violence is a public health crisis.
Sure. The tweet said that gun violence is a public health issue. And I said that after Newtown. I'll say it again today.
So obviously, we think this amendment by Senators Braun and Budd was a good idea. So how did it go? Well, here's just a bit of the debate.
But what we're talking about here is abuse of public health emergency powers.
And if we continue to overuse, for the sake of expediency, something which is intended to be only for emergencies, not as in, my gosh, we've got a baseline of issues that we're addressed in a variety of ways, but no, because in an effort to kind of satisfy a political itch, the president's going to declare this an emergency, we're going to undermine support for the presidency, for the government, and for the concept of a public health emergency. I think this amendment's good. It addresses misuse of emergency powers by the president. If everything's an emergency, nothing is an emergency.
And then they called the vote on the second amendment that Senator Braun offered at committee.
We'll now vote on Braun Amendment number 2. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Murray?
No by proxy.
Senator Casey? No. Senator Baldwin?
No by proxy.
Senator Murphy?
No by proxy.
Senator Kane? No. Senator Hassan? No. Senator Smith? No. Senator Lujan?
No by proxy.
Senator Hickenlooper? Senator Markey?
No by proxy.
Senator Cassidy?
Yes.
Senator Paul?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Collins?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Murkowski?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Braun?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Marshall?
Yes by proxy.
Senator Romney? Senator
Yes by
Tuberville?
proxy.
Senator Mullen?
Yes by proxy.
Senator
Yes
Budd?
by proxy.
Chairman Sanders?
Nope.
I have 10 ayes, 11 nays.
Noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Do senators even have to show up for work anymore? As you can see, we lost. It's a bummer, but this isn't the first time that Democrats have blocked this GOA-backed legislation, and it won't be the last. And you can be sure that we'll be using this vote to beat those anti-gun senators in their next election when they feign support for the Second Amendment on the campaign trail. That's it for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Be sure to be subscribed to stay up to date with the latest GOA updates.